I'm Nick Robinson.
Nick, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Getting back in the swing of things. It's a
Absolutely.
good thing. Today, we're back on the book of John. In fact,
We are.
Actually, the beginning, at some point, this is like the beginning and then different areas.
Yeah, in the book of John, we get the beautiful Christ hymn. You know, the Word was with God in the beginning, and the Word was with God, and Word was God, and nothing came into being without the Word. So we get Jesus present at the moment of creation. Then we get John the Baptist, and then Jesus starts calling people to follow him. Hey, come follow me. Hey, come see what I'm doing. Come be part of this ministry. And so we're going to look at that kind of aspect of discipleship today. We've thought a little bit over this last week about what it means to be called by Jesus, but here it's not just Jesus calling people. There are people who see Jesus, who then extend the invitation to follow Jesus to their friends, to their family members, and said, hey, come check out this guy with me. Come and see what he's doing. Come and see what he is all about. And that's how it works in our lives.
Sure.
I don't think many of us, none of us, have seen Jesus in person. We have maybe felt a call from Jesus or Jesus' presence around us, but we were probably introduced to Jesus by humans.
Sure.
By friends, by family members, by pastors.
Right.
And so that's what I want people to think about today. Like, who invited you into discipleship? Who is the person who saw Jesus before you did and said, hey, come follow him with me. Here's this great adventure we can go on.
Sure.
And so Dean, who invited you into discipleship?
Again, it was some years back in 1991, 92. I was going through a bad time, and I was going through a bad time, but I wasn't searching for something. I was just going through a bad time, and it found me, and it was through Tom Rust, who was a pastor or a youth director of Youth for Christ here in town, and wow. he went on to become a great host of Face to Face, which I was a part of. So that was it, and as I look back, I see the path that God had put me on there. Yeah. And I wasn't, it's not like I turned religion and stuff like that. It took me a while, and then the disciples that called me were people like Mark Tyke, Chad Foster, and they asked me, let me just say this, excuse me, in the 90s, I would never have thought I would ever work for a church.
Oh, yeah.
Never. I thought, this is, I'm not going to work for a church. Why would I work for a church? You've got to, But then, 10, 15 years later, a church calls me and says, "Hey, can you work for us?" And I said yes. So it's amazing. It really is.
So there are like different steps to your invitation to discipleship because like those first conversations with Tom Russ were kind of an invitation to faith, and then kind of here's an invitation to work in a church, which is a completely different experience.
Something that resonates with me from Tom, and you've heard me say this before, and if you haven't, you'll hear me, and you'll hear it right now. Tom always told me that, Christ will always be on your shoulder. Now, you may not acknowledge him there, but 10 years down the road, you can look back and he's there on your shoulder again. And that's exactly right.
Yeah. For me, people who invited me into discipleship were the youth director at my first church. In 1998 is when I started going to church again, and 99 was when it was like Christmas Eve, 98. So we didn't go to church very many times in 1998. But 1999, we started not missing church.
Right.
Started going all the time. And so the youth director there, Kathy Jackson, invited me into a walk of faith. The pastor there invited me into a walk of faith. There was a group of people who gathered to pray at school in the morning, and I would go to that, and they invited me into a deeper walk of faith. And then there's just constantly people inviting me to practice my faith. And even when I wasn't ready to practice it in that way, I remember there was a Good Friday when I was in college, and a pastor invited me to preach because there were 7 people preaching. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a lay person. We'll all be lay people. I'll try. But then there were 6 pastors and me, and I wasn't a pastor.
Right.
And so if I had known that, I definitely did not feel ready for that. But people seeing gifts and then inviting you into it. And one of the funniest things is I have a friend who's, I don't know what his faith is, if he's agnostic, if he's atheist, if he's something else. I'm not really sure. But he was going on a mission trip with the chapel at my college, and he invited me to go with them. And so even though he wasn't necessarily a person of faith, he respected the chaplain there, and he wanted to go do the work that they were doing. We were going to go build wheelchair ramps and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so he invited me on that trip, and that trip radically changed my faith.
Did you really?
Yeah, and so the invitation into discipleship came through somebody that wasn't a practicing Christian.
Sure.
It would introduce me to someone who was a very strongly practicing Christian, but it was an interesting occurrence, I think.
Sure. I think that when I first got into church work, I was a plant, as it were, as a person from the outside. When you walk through the church doors in the church that I worked at, it was like a totally different country. You know what I mean? I mean, it was a totally different thing. Things were going on inside the church that didn't go on out, and then you left for the day and you came back and it was there. I mean, it was really wild for me to really be a part of it. But it's great now. It's cool. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, and as we give thanks for these people who invited us into faith and then challenged us or invited us to put our faith into action and put it to work, it makes me think, who's waiting on us to ask them into faith?
That's great, man. That is great.
Who is waiting on us to, even if they already have faith, to ask them to put their faith into action? Like,
right.
Can you do this for the church? Can you do this for your neighbor? Can you, tell somebody about Jesus, or serve in this way? Can you put action behind your faith? There's somebody waiting for us to invite them into that challenge.
I think when it comes to Asbury, what I really, really love about Asbury is this. There's always at least 1 or 2 degrees of separation from everybody. Everybody's got something that they're doing here. It may be something small or maybe something big, but we're all connected in some way. It's really wild.
Yeah, and I always tell people, like, we're a smallish church, but we do a lot.
Yes.
And I also tell people we have a lot of people doing a lot, but we always need more people to do more.
Sure.
Like there's
exactly.
It's not that people are doing so many things and there's no room for you. There's plenty of room for new volunteers at upper levels of, like, if you think of upper levels as in coordinating ministry and overseeing ministry, and then lower levels like doing hands-on ministry, sometimes really simple things.
Sure.
And I don't mean higher and lower in terms of value of the work, because sometimes the hands-on stuff is way more important than the organizing. But in terms of complexities,
so I have a question for you then. When we talk about this, as a church leader, I mean, whether you call yourself a leader or not, you're a leader. Yeah. Would you think that it's not easier, but it's more, I don't know what the word I'm looking for. I'm sorry, I drew a blank, but it's more important for the people you lead. It's a small group. What about if you were to lead? Did you ever imagine leading somebody that's 1,500 to 1,000?
Like a big church?
Yeah, like a big church. Yeah.
I don't know. I've served in a big church once. It was 1,000 or 2,000 people, and I was the assistant youth director. And the youth group would literally have over 300 kids show up to events, and so it was a big time place. And as the assistant youth director, one of the 2 assistant youth directors, I worked closely with the youth director. But in the 2 years that I worked there, I saw the senior pastor twice, and one was at my interview, and one was at a staff lunch one summer, and that was it.
Wow, that's amazing.
And like, I didn't get to go to worship there because they did Sunday school at the same time as worship, so they had 2 worship services and Sunday school at two times, and so I didn't even get to go to church. I was just always leading Sunday school classes and things like that, and so I feel like I missed out on a lot of stuff in a place that big, and so I think it would be an interesting challenge. I don't know if that's my gift or not,
but I'm telling you, it's different with Asbury. Yeah. I'll give you a great example if you allow me.
Yeah.
This last weekend, we're having problems with the heat in the CWC. Everybody knows it because we're a community that we let everybody know what's going on. The group was trying to figure out what to do, all right? And we were doing it on Sunday. There was a meeting going on Sunday in the sanctuary while we're setting up, and they're trying to figure out how to do it. And all the pertinent people were there, Kevin.
Except me.
Except you. But still, I mean, Dan got on there and said, "Hey, let's just have this meeting now." And they brought the phone over there, Steve wasn't able to be there, and they just figured it out. And everybody was involved, and
Yeah.
that's. And when you say something like, I never even met the pastor but once and never got to worship and everything like that, and then something like this happens, like that, it's amazing.
And I think that's one of Asbury's strengths is that we have people who will step up and make decisions and lead and work together in a team, especially if there's something to get done. We're a group of people who like to get things done.
Right.
Which, as with engineering backgrounds in so many people's lives, kind of makes perfect sense.
Exactly. Okay, we're off on a tangent a little bit, but get us back into the book of John here.
Well, and we're kind of on a tangent, but not exactly, because all these people who stepped up on Sunday morning and stepping up in other ways have been invited, have been empowered to do that. Somebody has recognized the gifts in them and has said, yeah, please use them.
Sure.
Put them into action. And Asbury, we believe in supporting people in doing their work.
Sure.
How can we say yes to people? How can we help them do their work?
Right.
And so if God's putting something on your heart, let us know, because we would love to say to you, go and do the work God is calling you to do.
Right.
We would love to be that disciple investing in your discipleship.
Sure.
And I think as people listen to this, there's someone in their life that they know might be ready for that next step, might be ready to say yes to Jesus for the first time, might be yes to hearing about Jesus for the first time or the first time in a while, who might be itching to step into leadership of some kind, or to step into serving in some capacity. And that's our constant duty, is to be looking for who's going to replace us, and to hold on loosely to the ministry that we're doing, to love it, to pour our hearts and our lives into it, but also not to make it about us, to make it about serving God, to make it easier for us to invite other people into it. Because if it's something that we own so strongly that other people, that someone else coming in and doing it differently would just crush us. Like, that's something we have to be on the lookout for. Because if we're not empowering other people to do their ministry, then at some point we're going to have no one willing to do ministry, because they've gone somewhere else to put their lives and their faith into action.
Sure. And it's true, and you see it. And to be totally transparent, you see there, you could see that there was a short time in Asbury's past that the things kind of went in a couple, 3 or 4 directions, and there's kind of a hole in the age gap and stuff. And I'm not saying it's bad, good, or indifferent. I'm just saying it's there, and it's noticeable.
Yeah, and that's also too, like, someone was following their call there.
Yes.
And then it didn't end the way we wanted it to.
Right.
And so there's a risk in following our call.
Yes. Yeah.
And things can happen. And so we got to be ready for that adventure. And recovering from when it goes sideways is not always easy.
No. You think you've got it taken care of, but then all of a sudden 10 years down the road goes by, and there's people are wondering why there's not different volunteers in age groups and things like that. So, like I said, I'm not trying to start a thing. I'm just saying that it's there, and we have to deal with it. It'll be gone once it's, a few years down the road, but you got to deal with it as it comes on. So.
If you're in that age gap and you come to church here, invite some people your age to come to church here. There we go. Those are the people that you're called to invite into faith and invite into ministry. When we see the gaps, that's our invitation to respond. Yeah, I put it back on you.
Exactly.
Classic pastor move.
Yeah. Okay, what's next?
Well, let's close in prayer.
Sure, let's do it.
Hey, God, thank you for putting people on our hearts. Thank you for letting us use our gifts. If we have a place in our hearts where we want to serve, help us to step into it, enable the people around us to see the presence of those gifts in us, and help us to identify the people in our sphere of influence who are waiting for that invitation to follow you, to serve you, to practice their faith in a new way, a different way, or for the first time. God, help us to see, help us to respond, help us to invite. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
For Nick Robinson, I'm Dean O'Neill, and you're on The Daily Path.